I realize not many people actually know what the private banking is, what really private banks do, and why it's important if you're wealthy to have an advice from a private banker.
Yep, absolutely. I think that the key thing to note is that
I would like to welcome Joseph Poon, the head of private banking of DBS. Such an honor to have you with us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I want to ask you, who is Joseph Poon? Who is Joseph Poon when he is not one of the top world's banker? What keeps you busy? What keeps you awake at night? What are your interests?
I have many interests, but mostly it's about making sure that I get better every day. So I recently finished my quest to do 6 marathons around the world. I started 2018. I was meant to finish in 3 years. COVID happened, but I kept on going and learning and running and training. And I finally finished at the end of March last year. Actually, I apologize, only this year in Tokyo, because they canceled the marathon for foreigners for 3 years in a row. I had to finish it. So one of my traits is make sure when I start something, I finish. Nowadays, I'm taking it a little bit easier. I go to the gym about 4 o'clock in the morning. I did this morning. I do work out for about an hour, and then I do brisk walk for another hour or so. Trust me, it's for de-stressing rather than just being healthy. So for me, it's always trying to do a little bit better today than I did yesterday.
Wow, 4 o'clock in the morning. That's impressive. We're going to talk about a lot of subjects, but how did it start? Where your journey of becoming a world-class banker? How did you get into banking industry? And how did you find out? When did you find out that's really your calling?
Yeah, it's actually by accident. First of all, when I was at university, this is in the 80s, and it was during the time when the stock market was a little bit crazy. Everyone's making money. So here I was with my $300 I saved at that point in time. I bought one single stock in my country and all in because that stock kept on going up. And then the 87 Black Monday happened, and that became basically zero. And I remember burning the script. Those days in shares, you have a script. And I had to burn the script because it was worth 1 cent. I bought it for $3. And that was the most painful lesson for me about investing in the market is not easy. At that point, I was studying architecture. Next year, I've changed my degree to finance because I want to understand how to lose so much money and how to not do it again. And that's how it started, basically. Now, after I finished my degree, I actually went to Singapore. It was meant to be for a 3-year. A lot of Kiwis from New Zealand, they go to Singapore. They work for 3-4 years. They go back to New Zealand. But I found my journey was so exciting. I got into the finance sector. I was a stockbroker, taking orders just for client buying and selling. The market. In those days, it was Singapore market, Malaysian market, the Japan market. And it was difficult, but I learned also how to acquire clients. And the simple fact was that if you do the right thing by your client, they'll stick by you. And then I just grew in love with the whole investment industry, dealing with clients and helping them. So what kept me in this business actually is 3 things. I'm always looking for new things to do, new challenges, marathon, and now weight training and other things. And in a job as a private banker, I think your job changes every day. Every day you wake up, the world changes. The market condition changes. The financial market condition changes. Your client's life changes. All these come to affect how do you help the client to make sense of their wealth in an ever-changing world. So I see myself as creating a new job, solving a new problem, which I love to solve problems for clients every day. So that's 33 years later, I'm still loving it. I'm still solving problems of a different kind with a different set of clients more globally, and I find it fascinating. So I'll keep going until I find it not so exciting.
It's a huge responsibility. It's huge responsibility handling your money, your family money, but handling other people's money. It's, I'm sure, an extra responsibility, and because the expectations are different, and if you don't meet the expectations, people are naturally unhappy. So how did you cope with that in the beginning of your career, and how it's now? I mean, you're much more experienced. You're running a huge institution. There's a lot of support around you as well. But still, I'm sure there's a huge responsibility and pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you learn in your career, when in the beginning, you kind of just go along what the client tells you to do. And as you go through the years, you realize some clients actually don't do the right things for themselves without knowing it. So part of growing up in our industry is being able to really be very subjective and objective for the client situation, and tell them when you disagree with them. And that's hard, because when the client says, I'm giving you money to invest for me, and what I say goes. And by the way, I'm so successful, I'm so rich, what makes you think I'm wrong? And you're kind of this new guy, with your brand new suit, and you try to tell them. But over the years, if you learn about the market, you learn about how to risk manage, see beyond the client's immediate world, you actually give some good advice. And the biggest lesson I learned was to say no to a client. And by the way, if you say that with conviction, with some knowledge, and with some history, the client actually respects you for that. And then you end up having a conversation rather than taking orders. I mentioned earlier on, when you start, it's basically a client says, I want to buy X at this price, get it done. And that's it. Now, when it makes money, by the way, it's always they're being right. When they lose money, they blame you. So you'll get blamed anyway.
Yeah,
so you might as well get involved in the conversation.
And not much a recognition when the things are, because it's all me.
Yeah.
What is many people, I find everybody talks about investments, everybody talks about private banks, everybody talks about markets, but I realize not many people actually know what the private banking is, what really private banks do, and why it's important, if you're wealthy, to have an advice from a private banker.
Yep, absolutely. I think that the key thing to note is that our clients are rich when they come to us. Otherwise, they wouldn't be a private banking client. Our job, and many people get a wrong idea, is how to help clients to make lots of money. If you do that, by the way, you're taking a lot more risk than you realize. And then you'll be at the mercy of the market up and downs. And then, by the way, if you get distracted, for a lot of clients who are still running a business and have their other passions, you actually get lost in all this noise. My job is to make sure money works to the advantage of the client. And the first thing to do is make sure, how do I keep them safe? First thing to do is make sure that the money is put in the right jurisdiction based on where they are, in the right structure to make sure tax is being properly managed, and to make sure that if something happens to them, which can happen, that the wealth is being looked after, the wealth is liquid, that they pass on the wealth to their children or family or their favorite philanthropy. Because most clients have more money than they can spend their lifetime anyway. But people don't predict when they're going to pass on. And these things happen more than you like to think. So for me, that's more like the foundation. If you get your foundation right, private banking is all about setting the right foundation for the client, right? Secondly, once you have a solid foundation, you can look to grow the wealth. And growing the wealth is another issue. A lot of clients think investing is easy because they forget the mistakes that they make. They only remember the wins they've made in the past. Our job is to be a little bit naggy, a little bit dystopian, and plan for the best but expect the worst, right? And if you plan that way, the clients don't like that naturally. I give you money, you're supposed to make money for me. Actually, that's not true. The idea is to make sure that we balance their liquidity, the structure they have, and make sure that their wealth in totality grows. So answer your question, private banking job is more than wealth management. It's actually risk management. It's also evolved over time. I still remember that in the early 2000s, having many private banking accounts and private bankers is like a badge of honor. It's like, I've made it. But guess what? KYC, wealth being targeted. Nowadays, clients saying, actually, I want to be very discreet. I want maybe 2 or 3 private banks at most. I don't want to spend time managing my private bankers. I don't have to deal with the institution, having to explain where my wealth comes from every time I make some money. I want to really focus on building a long-term relationship. And the most important for most clients is that I want it to be private, because being public now is no good. Now, it doesn't mean there's anything nefarious about the wealth, but I just want to keep it private for lots of reasons, much more understated, whereas maybe in the early 2000s is more like, I got wealth, I want to flaunt it. So I think the level has gone past that because of regulation, because of the fact that people can read on news, social media, and you don't want to be a name. I remember one time when in China they start publishing the wealthiest people on the list, and the client says, "Don't ever put me in the list." Because guess what? You are drawing the fire and the attention.
Yeah, drawing a target on them.
A target on them.
Yeah.
And in some countries, particularly in Asia, kidnapping is still an issue. And the moment you're on Forbes' list, guess what? You become a bigger target. So I think the discretion is important. The last thing they want a private bank to do is make sure they really bring the best advisors to them. And that has changed. In the old days, I tell you what you execute. Nowadays, expect the private banker to say, okay, I've got a problem, or tell me where problems I missed out, and bring me the best people to solve that problem for me in a discreet manner. So they don't expect the private banker to be a master of all, right? They do expect the private to understand their problems, both what they understand and what's hidden, and then to find the best person in a particular vertical to bring them on board to share and help the client about solutioning and about thinking structures. So they look at the private bank in the old days expect to do everything. It is not possible. And the best private bankers are the ones who actually go out there and get the best solution and advice for the client.
That's one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, how the private banking is changing and also the implementation of new technologies. We spoke about AI being part of decision and solution making for private banking clients. Where do you see this technology coming in? And do you see it as a good thing? Do you see it as a bad thing? How helpful can it be? And at what extent it can replace a human factor?
Yeah. I think we are very, very fortunate in that the client do expect for us to use AI to do analysis, to really scan the market, to understand solutions. But at the end of the day, it's a personal relationship, right? The relationship it's like a family doctor. You know me, my background, my evolution of my family for many, many years now. So when I have a problem, you don't look at the problem in isolation. You look in the context of my history, my family, my business. Solutions are out there. Which is the best one that might fit my particular problem in this context? And in that, the private bank has a very, very important role. First, the family history. Secondly, understand the client's temperament. Doesn't mean something's logical all clients will follow necessarily, right? It's to fit their situation. And the third thing is to make sure it is future-proof, right? And AI can't do that for you, right? And future-proof meaning, for example, right now, the biggest issue for most clients is about geopolitics. And geopolitics has never been priced into financial markets in any way. You can't parameterize it. It's something you feel comfortable or not comfortable, and things happen overnight. Look at the wars in the last couple of years. Certain jurisdictions were good to invest, suddenly become uninvestable, and so on. So it's really about that conversation. The client feels that you are looking out for him or her and the family and what to do with the wealth going forward.
Yeah, when we talk about this geopolitics situation, it's not just the markets that are affected. It's the market for the clients that is affected because there's a lot of restrictions working or not working with the certain nationalities. I'm, my industry. I create a solution for people that are struggling with their mobilities, and unfortunately, we see that holding a wrong nationality passport or being in a wrong resident in wrong jurisdiction can limit you a lot or make it much easier for you.
Yes.
How do you see that? Do you think it's unfair?
Yeah.
Like you have a client for many years and he comes from a certain area, certain country, and all of a sudden that becomes a problematic.
Yes. You're absolutely right. I'm a practical guy, and I'm here to solve problems. So when a client comes to a situation, it's important to understand the client. And again, our history with the client tells it. Where did he make his money? Where is he putting his assets? What has changed that he's out of his control, right? By knowing the client for long term, beyond the headlines, beyond the geopolitics, we know how to deal with the client. You can't be throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Now, obviously, when there's some regulation comes in, we got to respect that fully. But beyond that, is really, do you know the client? Do you know where they make their money? And what are their aspirations? And what are some of the constraints they're facing now? How to help them? Residency is an important conversation, even without geopolitics, by the way. More and more of our clients are having children going to certain jurisdictions, for example, which attract a lot of tax issues. And they can plan properly with that, but without thinking, if they send money in, if they buy assets in that jurisdiction, first is the tax. Second, if something happens to a child or themselves, the estate part becomes very, very complex in many jurisdictions. And most clients just don't understand it. It's easy, I did this for a certain reason. But because laws and regulations change, so particularly in your business, Milos, you've done a fantastic job to make sure clients are abreast of what's going on, because these are constantly changing. You can't now, in perhaps maybe 15 years ago, you set a plan, a succession plan, you can put it in a drawer and forget it. Now you better look at it every 3 months.
Yeah.
Just in case things change, and it could change very drastically. So what you do with your client is fantastic. You really give them abreast of what's going on, give them optionalities, and the most important for clients now is that flexibility, that agility, to pivot from A to B when things happen beyond their control. So part of our job is to look at solutions which has a lot of wiggle room that allows clients to be a bit more flexible when things do change, to buy them time to plan properly. But even then, when we plan something solid like succession planning, it needs to have a plan B and a plan C. And often the plan B, the clients look at much more closely than plan A, because plan A is just temporary.
Well, I learned over the years that two most important things for a client is first to be safe, and the second one is to have options. When you're unsafe, the only thing that you think about is being safe.
Yes.
Once you're safe, you kind of take it for granted and say, okay, well, now I want to do this. So creating a possibility to have options, it's definitely something that clients value a lot. As a private banker, you have to say a lot no to people that are not used to being told no.
Absolutely.
So what are your tactics? How you do it? How you make somebody who's absolutely certain he's making the best decision, because he knows, of course he knows, he knows everything the best. And all of a sudden you have to come and you tell him, no, you don't know. I know better. This is what you should do, because your idea, it's absolutely nonsense.
Milos is an art. It's an art, it's not a science. I typically will play up, and first I do my research. Second, I know my client's temperament. I know that there's some who are engineer thinking, some are more visual, some are more text driven, and so on. So the idea is to say, okay, you think of this thesis, and let's go through this thesis. And let's go through this thesis about percentages. Your thesis is 100%? Is it really 100%? No, it's maybe 90%. Maybe it's 80%. Okay, great. What's the 20%? What if this happens? And I'll explain to a client there are many cases where things are unexpected, black swans, unforecastable, unpredictable, wipes people out. I've seen that in my career all the time. Are you okay with that possibility? Maybe not. And that possibility could be catastrophic. You made all this money, hard work. So I always remind them there's 2 rules in investment. Warren Buffett. First rule is don't lose money. Okay? Because if you don't lose money and don't lose so much money, you're in the game, you got time, you can make it back. Second rule is don't forget the first rule. It's very simple. It is risk management. You're already wealthy. Why do you want to bring your entire wealth to a casino? You can have fun. You certainly should go and have fun. But do you ever bring your entire safe and your bank account to a casino? Knowing the odds are not in your favor, you can't control it. The biggest issue, Milos, around a lot of clients is that when they invest in a similar industry as their own, and they believe they have this innate competence and ability to make sure for example, clients who invest in high-tech industry in a developed country, and they go to another not-so-developed country, and they say, because I know this technology, just put all my money into it. And this is where you hear the biggest no from me. You don't need further exposure. You've already got exposure. You got enough risk in your business that you can control in your domain. You know the players, you know the ecosystem. You have a degree of control. But when you go into the markets in a country, there's politics, there's corruption, there's lots of industry lobbying groups, there's taxes, there's structures. You have no clue about the risk you don't know. So you really want to double up or you do something else. So my biggest job for clients is to actually invest something away from their core business. Because sometimes, for example, real estate, as a matter of discussion, that there are certain things that are much more local real estate factors, supply, demand, and so on and so forth. But there are things that are macro, like interest rates. Interest rate goes up in a very, very quick way. Real estate around the world, like it or not, it's going to come down in a massive way. So I said to the client, are you concerned about interest rate risk? If there are, and you're borrowing a lot for your real estates, it's a time to trim some positions for you to keep dry powder to buy when the market's down. Rather than saying, I know real estate is going to go up, it's going forever. It does. But on these macro events, it happens. For example, in China, the education sector was a great sector to invest in. Chinese are aspiring to be educated, get the best job, good life, work with big companies. And this whole sector was worth $100 billion of market capitalization in China. But overnight, Chinese government decided that is not correct because it creates an unfair advantage. We can pay for tuition versus we can't pay for it. They wiped it out, become zero. And people understand education from another part of the world, invest in education and think demographics is going to be helpful, lost all their money because they're not diversified. The other thing was, I think was mentioned in one of our seminars recently, AT1s additional tier 1 capital, very safe for the bank. Guess what? Last year, a big European bank collapsed and all the AT1 holders, investors' money were wiped out overnight. And it shouldn't have done that way. They actually saved some shareholders to wipe out the AT1s. Normally, they take all the shareholders first before they go after AT1s. In this case, they make a very different decision and wipe out all the AT1s and kept some shareholders in place. It was unfair. It was not correct. People can go and sue the institution, but ultimately, you lost your money. And if you put all your money into AT1s, which is kind of nice investment, good returns, without diversifying, without being risk managed, you got a problem. And then you get your headache, and then it affects your life and your business.
Yeah. If you can pick 3 industries, obviously you always tell your clients to diversify and not to put all the eggs in one basket. But which 3 industries traditionally has shown as being the most safe and what would be your recommendation if you have to pick 3 industries?
Most clients will invest quite heavily in real estate, and it's been a great way to create wealth, right? So real estate is an important asset class, although clients sometimes overinvest in real estate, and there's liquidity issues, and there's lots of other issues that are being dealt with as well. So my job is not to tell clients not to invest in real estate. It's please invest because you know best, you know what to do. Then my job is to think about how do I help them to diversify that risk from real estate. Now, real estate, as you know, is very locationally based. So I ask them to, when they have their liquidity, to invest outside jurisdiction, right? Now, it could be some real estate elsewhere, which is great because they know real estate, they know the dynamics and all that, right? But again, then the other sectors, what do you do? For me, it's transformational companies that have a very, very strong economic moat. Companies that are year in, year out that makes money, predictable, very boring, consumer, food, healthcare, etc. Again, good track record, invest in those. Those are not sexy, but those are the companies that will give you day in, day out a return. And we know what those are around the world. Second, I look at demographics. I think with the aging population going forward, like it or not, it's healthcare. It's healthcare around the world. We know pension funds are not being funded properly, so a lot of people look after themselves, and therefore healthcare is a big issue, whether it's in emerging market or in developed markets. So depending where you're in, pharmacology, healthcare, and so on and so forth. That's another trend. The next trend is about Generation Z. Every generation comes up has their own way of doing things. One of the themes we talked about recently, for example, is luxury. I don't know if you realize, 20% of the buying of luxury goods, these high brand luxury goods, is by people below the age of 25. And in 5 years' time, 40% of the luxury market will be dominated by the Generation Z people who will be between, now they're 15, 25, so let's call it between 20 and 30. So what they do and what they buy is important for us because that really changes the dynamic of buying behavior going forward. So to me, it's solid real estate, but diversify in different countries, or in REITs, for example, real estate investment trusts, not in solid real estate, but in terms of real estate shares, diversify. So my job is always diversify.
Yeah, the second richest man in the earth is in the fashion, comes from the fashion industry.
It's done very well. And then to look at the big mega trends. Okay, so consumer first. We all need to eat. We need to dress and so on and so forth. And the third is rather demographics. And again, you'd be surprised how much money you can make from very boring businesses rather than catch the latest trend. We heard about .com, 95% drop to nothing. We heard about blockchain. We heard about NFTs. And now we heard about AI. There are AIs and there are AIs. I always tell clients, when you see a gold rush, go and sell shovels. Do not go and sell the gold process. Go and sell shovels. So the infrastructure behind the trend.
There is also a trend that everybody likes to talk about popular things and pretend to be kind of part of it.
That's right.
You saw it with the cryptocurrencies. Everybody was into Bitcoin, although 80% of these people never traded or never owned one cryptocurrency.
Agreed.
And then now everybody's talking about, AI, but they don't even know what that is.
That's exactly
and they're not part of it. So it's I would say a regular cafe talks, bragging in front of friends and people that they want to impress. Brings me to another question, and you see that a lot, and you can recognize it a lot. New wealth, new money, old money, behavior.
So first, let me just step back a little. It's a great question, Milos. First, the trend that's undeniable is called the curse of three generations. 95% of wealth never passes three generations. And there are sayings in every different culture. So shirt sleeve to shirt sleeve in Chinese is what you call. And typically, the first generation come from very little wealth, very humble background. They work hard, they're successful. So they're first generation. Second generation are the ones who are born under the same roof. They see their mother and their father working hard and created some business very successful, and they'll try to maintain it. And they're under pressure to make sure they do a good job to maintain it, right? They live in the same household, so even though the parents are gone, there's a shared value about the family legacy and the behavior and so on. So they get along. Then the third generation who grew up in different households, because now they're cousins, right? And they grew up in wealth with a silver spoon in their mouth. Their behavior are completely different. They don't see wealth as important. Sometimes see it as a burden. Sometimes have a very bad relationship with money, with wealth and friends and so on. Typically, all that gets squandered away or gets lost. So only 5% of the wealth from the first gen goes through pass through the third generation. Then it comes to new wealth and old wealth. Old wealth tends to be subtle, tends to be conservative, tends to be discreet. New wealth, and I think if I look back at my career, the new wealth ostentatiousness was around probably between 2002 and 2008. I think the GFC really put people back into, we're thinking about wealth in the long term. So during that stage, I think wealth become less ostentatious, right? And people are a bit more careful. Look at the 2010s onwards. I think wealth becomes, people get targeted. So in the new wealth, the amount of expression is lesser, but the thing I see more is old wealth that's quiet, is more material goods still. You see some crazy collections that people collecting things they want to collect, and it's still material based. New wealth more about experiential. It's more about experiential. How do I find my purpose? How do I find giving properly? How to make an impact in the world in the new wealth, right? So the ostentatiousness is gone, but in many sense is much more experiential, impactful what I do in the new wealth. Old wealth tends to be dynastic as well. I want to keep it. I want my name. I want my children. I want my grandchildren, great-grandchildren to carry my name and show what I've done. New wealth, not so much about linking my name to the things I do, but I do want to make an impact.
What do you think of investing in art, and is private banking tapping into this industry? And do you see it's something that can become more and more attractive.
Yes, I do think so, but I do see that art should be collected because people love art, not because of the investment thesis. I've seen clients who does that, and when the art price goes up and down, they get very much affected because they have no emotional attachment to the piece of work. I see clients who collect art, and believe it or not, there's a client who collects snuff bottles, China snuff bottle with the whole tobacco powder. Crazy story, high-tech guy, you never thought about, 1,700 bottles he made. It's of something of value to him. And the collection's worth, let's call it $50, $70 million. Wow. Thousands of it in a room. And for him, it's not about the price. It's about he's able to get the next thing. He's about he play around with it, looks at the structure, how they made it, who held it, during what era, in what particular royal court in China was held, and so on and so forth. So once that passion is in there, the money will come. So to share that with you, there are lots of clients who collect a lot of very funny things, but the ones who stay the long term are the ones who are passionate about what they're collecting, and that makes a difference. So in terms of investment, yes, they have some value. Very hard to say they are negatively correlated to financial assets, so they do provide some diversification. But I do find most clients who are successful is because they love what they collect rather than just see it as an investment. But I see clients collecting all sorts of very, very unique things in my career.
I'm sure you have many anecdotes throughout your career with your clients. If you could pick one interesting story that you can share with us, a funny one, interesting, or a very stressful one.
Very stressful one. Maybe one quick one is about appearance, which I've learned. 25 years ago, in private banking, and my boss tells me, you better overdress for every occasion to your client, because client come from wealth. They don't want to see someone with a pair of jeans with a hole to manage their millions and millions and millions. So dressing was very important. So it was something I really held on to today. So about 1997, so 20-something years ago, I was at the bank, and I was late, and I rushed into the bank, and there was this gentleman who walked, behind me, and I felt that he was tailgating me, and he was holding some plastic bag clear with something inside, and he can follow me, and so I said, kind of looked at him and say, are you tailgating me, and so on. With a branch, those days, private banking is at the back of the branches. I thought it's a branch customer and so on, but he was tailgating me, so something maybe weird going on. Then he's holding, and as I turned around to talk to him, he said, he waved the envelope, and I thought, this guy looks like a delivery guy, envelope, So I just pointed to the cubicle where the delivery guys go. And he didn't understand me. He speaks a different dialect of Chinese, so I went there and did his thing. And then it turns out that later in the day, I had coffee with my colleague, and he said, "Oh, my big client came in today. We mailed him the wrong client statement. He brought it back. He was very upset. This client was worth $300 million. It was the biggest client of the branch that we had. So I was so embarrassed. To this very day, I still haven't told my colleague.
That was the guy.
That was the guy.
Oh
that was the guy who had a plastic bag with 2 bits of mail waving in my face. And I said, you go to see the mail room. Yeah. And he didn't understand what I said. And he walked there. So my lesson from there is, don't judge people by appearance. Do not judge people by appearance. Everyone, in every walk, not just private banking, in life, never judge. With many clients who are very overdressed and a bit modest, but many clients, when the element comes in singlets, literally holding plastic bags. One client, he's worth $300 million, and he goes to shop every day himself because he doesn't trust anybody to buy his food, and he will carry a 3-cent red plastic bag, and that's the way he wants to walk around, and he's happy with that. So I learned that in our business, in life in general, never ever judge by appearance. Even though we have to dress well, the client don't have to. And never judgeable by his cover.
I've learned that in my career, in my job. We deal with the same clientele, and starting in this industry, I had a perception that every wealthy client will show up in the best suit and with the best watch and the best car, and that's not the reality. Usually, the ones that struggle to afford these things are the ones that are going for it the most. The ones that they easily can afford it. It's not much of a pressure on them to show it. And I never judge people by the way they dressed. And most of my wealthiest and most successful clients are the modest people that I've met in my life.
Absolutely.
I want to. I know we don't have too much time, so before you. My guest was a French football player, Florent Malouda, who's played with Chelsea, played the World Cup final, won a Champions League. And we have this tradition that the previous guests ask the question to our next guest without knowing who the next guest is.
Okay.
So Florent Malouda is asking you, what is your next move?
My next move would be to really help clients to understand that having the right structure for their wealth is much more important than trying to make money. Again, the whole quicksand versus building a castle. If your foundation is not correct about jurisdictional changes, geopolitics, family, where they're going, where they want to stay, where they want to sit, how would they pay for certain things, you have a problem. And the bigger the castle you build, the more money you make, the quicker it's going to sink, right? So to me, my next move is make sure clients understand that, because most clients are still coming to the private bank and say, how much money can you make me? The question ought to be, how much money can you save me? How much money can you make sure that I don't lose because of these other changes, not just the markets, but regulations, geopolitics, and so on. So my mixed move for myself and all my colleagues is to make sure we ask that question. Because that question is uncomfortable for clients to think about, but to me, it's the most critical question.
Thank you. And now it's your turn. You don't know who next guest is going to be, but I want you to ask the question.
Okay, so AI is fascinating to me, and part of AI is these deep fakes you keep seeing. And in fact, I did a funny deepfake last year of Tom Cruise, and it turned out very well. So my question is to the next guest, whoever that may be, if someday you find a deepfake of yourself in social media, which by all definition was a much better version of your real self, so which is what I did. I was Tom Cruise. I was definitely not Tom Cruise. If they find that on the internet somewhere of them, it's authentic, but all their best attributes, make them look better than real life, the question would be, would they go and try to delete that? Or they want to keep it there because it brings them up to the next level? That's my question to the next guest.
That's a cool question. That's a cool, very interesting question. Well, thank you so much. I learned a lot, and thank you for this opportunity to pick your brain and for you to share your thoughts. And thank you for being a good friend and a partner to Soland.
Thank you, Milos. You're very, very kind. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to come back as well. So thank you so much, and I wish your audience a good day ahead as well.
Pleasure is all ours.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.